I love that lately, when something moves us so much, we don't feel the need always to clap. Instead, we simply let it feed our being. But I want to give you the opportunity to say thank you for that piece and for Norton Wisdom today. Some of you know that the composer Patrick Cassidy is part of this family, and we are so privileged to be able to do his work, to premiere his work, to work with him on whatever the next thing is, and we love having that connection. And Norton Wisdom has been our friend for oh so long, and he brings to us just such a different feel of a service when he paints in part of everything else. So today is Ascension Sunday. When I was in divinity school, I had done a lot of tearing apart of my faith, taking it out and looking at it differently and looking at what I believed and what I had been told and what did it all really mean to me. I'd done a lot of that before I went to divinity school, and then divinity school was like that to the 1000th percent. It was way over the top. But I still clung to some things that were sort of part of my childhood, but not really. I love the specific Sundays that are for specific things. So I thought everybody in the world did. I was asked to preach, as many of us are in divinity school, a few times. And because I thought everybody did, I didn't think to ask the minister if on Trinity Sunday or Ascension Sunday, that's what they would be celebrating. So the first time I messed up was, I think, on a Trinity Sunday. I gave this fabulous sermon about the Trinity, the three parts, what it had meant to me, experiencing them in different ways. And then after the service, the minister called me aside and said, "We don't really do the Trinity." Oops. So then I did it on Ascension Sunday. What you would have thought that I would have learned and asked before, but oh no. And I mostly, thank goodness, talked about my favorite part of Ascension Sunday, which is a fabulous painting that Salvador Dali did. If you've never seen it, you need to look it up. It is amazing. But all that to say, Ascension Sunday has been woven throughout everything we've done this morning, so I'm not really preaching on that today. So I am going to take us back to the first 6 months of COVID. During those first 6 months, I searched for the perfect mask. Once I knew masks were going to be part of our lives, I started ordering masks. And I ordered lots and lots of masks. Do you remember in the beginning how you could not find them anywhere? And acquiring masks along with toilet paper and canned food became the overriding mission of my life. The first masks I found were made in LA by the daughter of one of my husband's roommates from veterinary school. Her company was called La La Land, and how can you not love a mask from a company named that? When the mask arrived, I was thrilled. They were so cute, they were comfortable, easy to wash, and they were perfect. And in those days, the only one that you could get anywhere came in my favorite colors, black and white. They were a little small for my husband, though, so I kept searching, and I found for him what our son used to wear when he was out on his boat, a gaiter. I never really figured out why they called it gaiter, but Fred rather liked how nice and easy it was to wear the gaiter masks. At some point within the first few months, I decided we had enough masks. But little did I know that we would be wearing those suckers for what seemed like forever. Finding a mask that worked for you and came up to the high standards that kept changing were an ongoing project. At least it was for those of us that finally got the hint that wearing masks were going to be as important as wearing pants out in public. Truthfully, I hated wearing masks, even the ones that were wonderful fashion additions. But like every single person in our world at that time, I had to accept that wearing a mask was to become second nature. Wearing masks protected me and my family and everyone else I came in contact with. Wearing a mask in those days was one of the basic building blocks of our humanity. It was during those days that Reverend Michael and I first picked up the Book of Joy. At that time, it was the guidebook that helped save our sanity in that first long year. And here we are again in a world that has been turned upside down. And we are thinking once more about the Book of Joy. It is an amazing book by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. In 2016, the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu had no inkling of how drastic our world would change in such a short time. It would be easy to say their thoughts about the possibility of joy were too far removed from our reality, both in 2020 and now again in 2026. Yet, like the wide body of Scripture from many traditions that inform our faith today, we have the opportunity to read and absorb their truth once again in our current context. My copy of the book is now dog-eared. I have written all over it. I have Post-it notes in different colors from different times and circumstances. And each time I pick it up again, I am in awe of those spiritual giants and the ways they call to us from a perspective of humility and laughter. They continue even now to lead us through the new rough and bumpy roads. And as they lead us forward, we are reminded once again that each time we see life in its wider perspective, each time we can see our role in its drama, then with some degree of humility, we become able to laugh at ourselves again. I know it sounds far-fetched some days. It is possible, though, for us to have the ability to accept our life in all its pain, its imperfection, and beauty. Acceptance, they point out, is the opposite of resignation and defeat. While the Dalai Lama and the late Archbishop have been two of the most tireless activists for creating a better world for all its inhabitants, their activism comes from a deep acceptance of what is. Archbishop Tutu did not accept the inevitability of apartheid, nor did the Dalai Lama agree with the oppression of the Tibetan people and his exile. Yet both men learned to accept those realities. It still seems as if the Archbishop is speaking directly into our days when we remember he always believed we are meant to live in joy. But that does not mean life will be easy or painless. Rather, it means that we can turn our face to the wind and accept that this is another storm we must pass through. We cannot, he said, succeed by denying what exists. The acceptance of reality is the only place from which change can begin. I remember thinking in those first days of March 2020 that we would be back in church by the end of June. And then I began thinking it would be the end of August. And then August came, and finally I had to accept that the reality of COVID would be with us for a long time. But somehow during that long, drawn-out time, so many of us came to know deep within our being just how vital this spiritual home was. But because then, as now in this place, whether you have a lot of faith, a little faith, absolutely no faith, or are of another faith, accepting that this is your home, your spiritual home, can make a huge difference in your life. This acceptance of our reality allows us to engage with the life that is here and now. The Dalai Lama has said that stress and anxiety come from our expectations of how life should be. He believes when we are able to accept reality, we are able to ease the ride, to go from the bumpy axle, the dukkha, with all its suffering, stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction, to the smooth axle, sukha, with its greater ease, comfort, and happiness. Last night in this place, I had the opportunity to hear the lived reality of the people of Palestine. The anger and the rawness of what has been and still is, the reality of their homeland, and the reality of the god-awful wars that have sprung up all around them, causing the world to lose its focus on the plight of Palestinians, is beyond anything most of us could imagine. Our first inclination, my first inclination, is to turn away. But we have to see the reality of all that is before we can begin to change what is to what can be. And it was such a sweet gift last night to sit right in that middle row next to the most beautiful baby that had brought their mom and dad with them to that event that was about that baby's future. The Dalai Lama and the Archbishop, from their wisdom, have told us, if we accept the reality of the present, we can move mountains in order to help create a future story whose reality is found deep within the belief that all people are the beloved of the divine. Even though sometimes it does not feel like it, we have come from a long line of people who lived through the most difficult times imaginable. History tells us throughout the ages, the people of goodwill have been a tenacious bunch. They are a holy lineage of risk takers and truth tellers. They have chosen each other in the midst of danger, and together they have turned towards love as they practiced courage. They defied social norms that confine and resisted the forms of power that destroy. God continually draws together the open-hearted, the passionate and the brave, the tender and the humble, and the ones who provoke justice, and summon ideas that transform. Through it all, we have been reminded to follow the example of Jesus, who is the divine embrace of all those who feel forsaken and find the love of God incarnates a miracle that can help us all find a home. This table is about that spirit. Before the scriptures tell us Jesus ascended, many times he had sat at a table with his friends in order to tell them again and again and again how much they were loved. There was not a litmus test. There was not an exam they had to pass. There was just love. So today, as we come to this table, let us remember to give thanks for those who helped us to experience with our mind and our heart the love of God. And at this table, may we also begin to understand the love and acceptance of each other and ourselves. Let us come to the table.